Chapter 7. The End of the Camino in Finisterre. What do you really want? Taking the bad pilgrim bus to Murcia. Day 40. Santiago, Murcia, bad pilgrim bus. While my original plan was to continue walking for 5 more days to Finisterre, the legendary end of the world, something had shifted. My pilgrimage had already done its work. The spiral had brought me to a still point, and my heart wasn't calling for more kilometers. It was calling for my family. So I did what many might consider unorthodox for a true pilgrim. I began to imagine an alternative ending. What if I took the bus to Murcia, a picturesque coastal town on the Atlantic? What if I walked only 1 more day from Murcia to Finisterre, symbolically completing the journey, yet also honoring my inner timing? This option would give me both: a walk to the edge of the world and an earlier return home to the people I love and missed. That felt true. So I followed it. For a moment I wondered if I was cheating. Then I remembered that Camino is not about performance. It's a pilgrimage. I called Iberia, changed my return flight to June 16th. Riding the bus felt surreal. Who would have thought I'd end up on the bad pilgrim bus after all? I arrived in Murcia, the wild rhythm of walking had passed, and I found myself drawn into something more mundane and surprisingly symbolic. I went to a local barber shop, sat in the chair and asked for a trim. Not a full shave. My beard had grown like a marker of the untamed path I'd walked, though just enough to soften the wilderness. It wasn't about looking polished. It was about softening the threshold between who I had been and who I was becoming. Something in me was shifting. The wild part of the Camino was over, and I was preparing to re-enter civilian life. A few reflection questions. What's your true ending? Where in your life have you been pushing for completion even though you've already received the transformation? What plan might you soften without giving up its meaning? What would re-entry with intention look like for you? 2 million steps for no. Day 41. Murcia, Finisterre, 29 kilometers. I got up before sunrise to meditate at a power spot, a giant granite shell close to the ocean. I picked up my backpack and started walking through a foggy eucalyptus forest. I had 1 more day before reaching the edge of the world, the place marked with a 0 milestone near the lighthouse of Finisterre. I had walked for 40 days and covered nearly 1,000 kilometers, including rest day city strolls, roughly 2 million steps. The law of synchronicity had a surprise for me. I had intuitively decided to stay at El Espiral, a hostel that had left a small, almost hidden sign at a pilgrim's apple box just outside Libre, halfway to Finisterre. It caught my eye, a colorful flower of life symbol, the perfect place for my last night on the Camino. To get there, I had to pass through the entire town of Finisterre. It was one of the last hostels, almost tucked away, and its door stood a large human-sized flower of life symbol. It had an almost magnetic pull, a powerful emblem holding the sacred geometry and all the building blocks of life. And there it was, waiting for me like a quiet welcome sign. It felt like I was arriving home. I checked in for a bed, received a number, and scheduled a massage appointment for the next day. As if the universe were winking at me, I found myself sharing a bunk with Maciek, my Polish friend I hadn't seen since Lugo. We looked at each other, stunned and smiling, and embraced with joy. You always meet again, we laughed. We decided to pick up a bottle of red wine, a light jacket, to complete the Camino with a sunset. That evening we made our way to the cliffs below the lighthouse at Finisterre. As the sun began to dip, we joined a few other pilgrims on the rocks above the crashing waves. The seagulls cried above, the mild wind smelled of salt. The vast Atlantic stretched in front of us, eternal and infinite. We sat there in gratitude and silence, letting the final moments of the sunset wash over us. This was the end of the road, the final breath of my first Camino. Pilgrims had come here for centuries to burn a piece of clothing, an outer symbol of an inner shift, not as an ending, though as a ritual of release. I burned a wristband I had acquired in Pamplona. The Camino had brought me to the edge of the continent and of myself. As the golden ball disappeared beyond the horizon, I knew something had ended. And in that ending, something entirely new had begun. I had asked myself the question I still hadn't answered. What am I going to do with my life? Am I going to return to the corporate life and become another CFO? And without hesitation, my whole body answered with a very strong call from every cell. No, no way. It wasn't a quiet, thoughtful no. It was a resounding rejection and an answer so clear and visceral I could feel it in my bones. A no built on 2 million steps. Sometimes the real gift of a long journey isn't the answer. It's the full body no that clears space for the real question. That no became the foundation for the next, for the more important question. If not corporate, then what? And just like that, a door opened. Abracadabra, the seed of a new beginning. Day 43, Finisterre. The next morning I went to the little harbor of Finisterre to witness the first sunrise of a new beginning. This was the first morning of my new Camino, the Camino I would continue to walk home and create in my life every day. There I spoke aloud the word abracadabra, to declare my commitment to becoming a coach, guiding others through deep personal transformation. The feeling was intense. The concepts and ideas were still vague. And I knew I only had to keep doing what I had done over the past 6 weeks. Follow the signs. Meet fun and interesting people. Connecting, listening, serving, holding sacred space. Everything else would emerge. Simple, though not necessarily easy. And now, that quote from Hospital del Alma returned to me, not just because beautiful words, but as a living truth. When you find your path, others will find you. Once they're on their path, they will be drawn to your door. The path that cannot be heard will resonate in your voice, and the path that cannot be seen will be reflected in your eyes. Wisdom from the Camino found in Hotel Dalma Castelleritz. Full circle. It was my last day, and I had all the time I needed, freely wandering to the beach, then strolling through the small harbor of Finisterre. The air was salty and still. I was at the edge of the world, quite literally, and quietly savoring the final steps of my journey. Then, just like on day 1, I ran into Imogen from New Zealand. We had met on the first day morning of the Camino, on the way up to Roncesvalles. Now here she was again at the end, full circle. She had walked the entire Camino with Daniel, an Argentinian pilgrim I had also met on the first day. Step by step, they had fallen in love. Day by day, they had become a couple. And now here at Finisterre, Imogen was considering a bold next step, leaving her home behind to move to Portugal and start a new chapter with him. It felt like something the Camino itself had gently arranged. Not forced, not planned, just unfolded. 2 lives brought together by chance, held together by the rhythm of walking, and guided into something new by the quiet wisdom of the way. They weren't the only ones. Back in Navarrete, I had met Bob and Sue, a Canadian couple who had fallen in love the year before on the Camino. This year, they returned to walk again, side by side, from strangers to pilgrims to partners in life. The Camino has a way of doing that. It brings people's path together with quiet precision, timing that only makes sense in hindsight. You may begin alone, though you never walk entirely by yourself. And as many pilgrims say, often with a knowing smile, on the Camino, you always meet twice. Invitation at the edge. If you are still here reading, I believe you are not just a reader. You are a fellow pilgrim. Someone who knows the journey isn't over, it's just shifting form. Some people reach Finisterre and keep walking. They've arrived at the end of the world and something inside whispers, now it begins. After the Camino is before the Camino, this book isn't just a story, it's a doorway. And if something stirred in you along the way, I want to invite you to walk further, this time not alone. When I meet potential clients, I don't sell. I listen. I serve. I come from a place of invitation, like on the Camino, with or without you. Because if we're going to walk together, it has to matter for both of us. Let me invite you to a powerful reflection exercise, one I love to offer anyone considering a coaching journey with me. 6 questions to step into your next chapter. I invite you to take a piece of paper, set aside an uninterrupted half hour, better 45 minutes, and journal through this 6-step vision exercise. One I learned from Rich Litvin. Step 1. The vision. Imagine we meet again in 3 or 5 years, over an espresso at a beautiful place you love. You smile and say, Martin, it's been the best 3 years of my professional life. Where are we? And what are you telling me? What are 3 to 5 things that are true by then? Maybe were even unimaginable 3 to 5 years ago. Let your intuition write down what needs to be put on paper. Once you complete it, move to the second, mastering risk. In that process of the last 3-4 years, what were the 2 or 3 hurdles, identity shifts, you had to overcome to master the risk? What used to feel hard back then, which has now become a story of growth and expansion? Take your time to reflect on the risk and the hurdles. And once completed, move to the next. Step 3. Chances and opportunities. What new doors have opened over the last 3 years? Ones you couldn't even imagine back then. What opportunities for expansion and growth have demonstrated? What was the high path of 10x growth, exponential growth that was possible? I invite you to reflect on these opportunities. And then you move to step 4, strength, zone of genius. Which of your 2 or 3 key strengths feel effortless and make you be fully alive? It's very easy for you to do that. What are your zone of genius that feels playful to be in and totally you, effortless? Once you reflected on your zone of genius, I invite you to move on to the step 5, the shadows or saboteurs. What is the price of your zone of genius, your brilliance? How does it show up in your life? What are the saboteur sides of this strength that want to keep you safe? I invite you to reflect on the price or the shadow side of your zone of genius. And then as a 6th step, I invite you to step into momentum and action. Reflect on your current side and look back 6 months. What have you done over the last 6 months to walk toward this bigger vision, to start creating it? What were the 2 or 3 key actions that you have already stepped forward and they just might need another step? Now to the other side, if you look 6 months out, what are the 2 or 3 key actions that if you put them into place, you will make step forwards to making the vision become a reality? And now my offer. Would you like some help with the creation of your vision? And if so, how could I be of service to you? If this exercise speaks to you and you feel an inner calling to share with the world, I invite you to write me your answers. You can reach me directly, not with a pitch, with a gentle invitation. Hey, Martin, I'm ready to walk. Let's have a conversation. A new beginning at the end of the world. I thought Finisterre was the end of my Camino. In hindsight, it was the beginning of my next chapter of life. I returned home to Munich with a clear yet unshaped calling. I didn't have all the answers, though I carried a knowing like a quiet flame. I wanted to build something new, something meaningful, something truly mine. So I took a courageous leap. I invested part of my severance package into training as a business coach with the Munich Business Coaching Academy. Interestingly, Chapter 7. The end of the Camino in Finisterre. What do you really want? Taking the bad pilgrim bus to Murcia. Day 40. Santiago, Murcia, bad pilgrim bus. While my original plan was to continue walking for 5 more days to Finisterre, the legendary end of the world, something had shifted. My pilgrimage had already done its work. The spiral had brought me to a still point, and my heart wasn't calling for more kilometers. It was calling for my family. So I did what many might consider unorthodox for a true pilgrim. I began to imagine an alternative ending. What if I took the bus to Murcia, a picturesque coastal town on the Atlantic? What if I walked only 1 more day from Murcia to Finisterre, symbolically completing the journey, yet also honoring my inner timing? This option would give me both, a walk to the edge of the world and an earlier return home to the people I love and missed. That felt true. So I followed it. For a moment I wondered if I was cheating. Then I remembered the Camino is not about performance. It's a pilgrimage. I called Iberia, changed my return flight to June 16th. Riding the bus felt surreal. Who would have thought I'd end up on the bad pilgrim bus after all? I arrived in Murcia, the wild rhythm of walking had passed, and I found myself drawn into something more mundane and surprisingly symbolic.